So thank you all very much for joining us. And people on YouTube, thank you for joining us. And as always, if you have any comments or questions, don't hesitate to let us know by email. And so we're going to begin our opening prayers. Kunga is going to be the Umze this evening. So
Which prayers would you like?
you can do the opening prayers, the altruistic motivation, action bodhicitta, etc.
Okay, how far would you like me to go?
I would go to the end of the four immeasurables.
Okay. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in a state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, especially the enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in a state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Dagla dang war je pe dra no par je pe geg. Dar pa dong thom je ke pe par du cho par je pe tam je ki so je pe. Manang ka dang am pe sem chen tam che de wa dang den. Dug now dang drill ner du la na me pa yang dag par zog pe jeng chu rimpo che so par je. Action Bodhicitta prayer. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds of body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds of body, speech, and mind. And now until this time, tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds of body, speech, and mind. Dashe du se ma ke ki bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. Ma she bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. Du de ring ne sam te ni ma sang da sam gi bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. Long refuge prayer. We take refuge in the kind of lamas, lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities of Mandela's Edams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dhaka, Dakini, and Dharma guardians, possessing the eye of wisdom. We take refuge in the kind of lamas, lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities of Mandela's Edams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dhakat, Dakini, Dharma guardian, possessor of the eye of wisdom. Trinchin sawa deng jipar chepe peldan lama dampa namla kapsuchio. Yidem kilkor gilo shog namla kapsuchio. Sange chomden de namla kapsuchio. Dampe cho namla kapsuchio. Pagpege du namla kapsuchio. Pawo kandro chokang same shogeshe kichen deng dempa namla kapsuchio. Taking the Bodhisattva vow. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas, take refuge in the Dharmas, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind, progressed in the Bodhisattva path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to Bodhicitta and apply myself to common stages of the path. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas, take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind, progressed in the Bodhisattva path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to Bodhicitta and apply myself to common stages of the path. Cheng Shub Ding Porchiki Bar Sange Namla Kapsuchi Jodang Cheng Shub Senpai Shogla Yang Deshin Kapsuchi Jitar Nangi Desheki Cheng Shub No Niki Padang Cheng Shub Senpai La Pala Deda Grimshin Nepatar Deshin Drula Pendandu Cheng Shub Sen Neki Shijing Deshin Du Ni La Pala Rinpoche Du La Parji Ho. Short refuge prayer. In the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached by the merit, generosity, and other good deeds, may attain Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached by the merit, generosity, and other good deeds, may attain Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. Senge chodong so king cho nam la, chang chu bardu dak ni kap suchi, dagi jin so ki pesonaki, drola pinchir senge drupar shok. The four measurables. May all mother sentient being balance the sky of happiness and the cause of happiness, and liberate from suffering, the cause of suffering, and never separate from happiness, and free from sorrow. May the rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient being balance the sky of happiness and the cause of happiness. May they liberate from suffering, the cause of suffering. May they never be separated from happiness that's free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Manang kadang nampe semchen tamche dewa deng dewe gudeng den parjur cheek. Dugna den dugna ki gudeng drawa jur cheek. Dugna mepe dewa deng mi drawa jur cheek. Nering chek deng ni deng drawa deng namlen nema parjur cheek.
Thank you very much. So last week we talked about refuge. Did anybody have any comments or questions about taking refuge, or any other questions about anything else that we have talked about, or maybe you'd like to talk about?
Oh, I would like to bring up, since Zara kind of came in on our conversation, so I'll just explain what the Rakasu is, Zara. So the Rakasu is like a miniature Buddha's robe. It um it was developed in Zen practice in Japan during a time period when the monks were it was against the law for them to wear the full-size Kesa robe. So they made this little robe, looks like a bib, that they wear under their clothes so they could still be wearing their robes, but no one would know that they were breaking the law. And so a refuge practice in Zen is to sew your own little rakasu, and every stitch, it has a special kind of stitch you use called well, it's not exactly a Kashanti stitch. But the word very similar, so I just call it the Kashanti stitch, kind of like patience. But you make these little stitches. Each stitch is a little smaller than an eighth and about just a little bit bigger than a 16th as far as being close together. And every time you put a stitch, you put the needle in, you say, I go for refuge to Buddha. And then when every time you pull it out, you say, I go for refuge to Buddha. And so this rakasu is made up of these different patches sewn together, like the Buddha's robe was made of these different patches of cloth sewn together. And well, I don't know. There's hundreds of stitches in there. So each one is a refuge vow. So it's sort of like the Nundro prostrations, except for here you're just doing it with the little stitch. So that's all I had to say about refuge.
Thank you. Kunga, I just wanted to clarify, and I apologize for my ignorance and gap. You practice Zen Buddhism, is that correct?
Hmm?
Okay. I, okay,
Well,
that's
and
really,
Tibetan. I mean, I'm not a purist. I
well,
practice both.
well, that I mean, I think that's a true sign of where you are on the path, like where you see the fluidity and variability all as one and the same. Ultimately, they're all the same path. So I just it was more of a question of curiosity. I find that personally really fascinating. And I lived in Japan, that's why I was asking because I lived there for a couple of years and got to go to some of the ceremonial components and the temples. So I'm familiar, and I find it all very fascinating. So thank you for sharing. Thank you. Lance, I didn't have questions about refuge specifically because I'm doing the Mahamudra program, so I'm going through that. But if I do have any specific to what you were going through in this course, I will definitely ask you.
Very good. Thank you. All right, so then moving along to the next chapter, chapter 9. This is the antidote to not knowing the method to practice for achieving Buddhahood. And we're talking about the method, and in particular, the cultivation of bodhicitta. So, understanding bodhicitta. So, we've talked about it any number of times. And so, we're going to get a little bit more into the detail of it. And it applies to everything that we do. You know, bodhicitta, these four immeasurable qualities of bodhicitta. It is we could say it is the qualities of what the embodiment of being a Buddha is, an enlightened being, because it's more than just the Buddha itself, but for those who are on the path to become Buddha. So a bodhisattva practitioner is developing the awareness of bodhicitta, how to practice it, why we practice it, and so on. A yogi or a yogini is becoming in union with it. They are indeed becoming the embodiment of that bodhicitta. And then the bodhisattva is purifying the bodhicitta, purifying the understanding, purifying the practices of it. So, and as they do that, it's like a glass that is getting filled up with pure water, and as it rises up, that water rises up, that the purity of the bodhicitta replaces the air that would be in that glass with the liquid, if you will, of the water of the bodhicitta itself, the moisture of the bodhicitta itself. So it's a process, and so to understand this better, we'll engage in this conversation. This chapter 9 begins with these 22 similes of bodhicitta. So I'm not going to go through these right now. I think you should read these. I think you should contemplate these on your own. And then at some later time, we could have more detailed conversation. But I think at this time, if I were to just go through reading this, it would just kind of, in many cases, just kind of go in one ear and out the other. So I'd rather you have some experience with it, contemplating it, reading it on your own, and then have a conversation about it. Maybe it would make more sense to you, and so on. If anybody has a comment or question, as always, just speak right up and interrupt me. So, going to the next page, I'm looking at the this outline condensation of the JEWEL Ornament of Liberation. So, going to the next page on 16. We start off with the primary characteristics of bodhicitta. So what are these? So this is something that is always confusing because we're talking about the two levels of bodhicitta, and we're talking about the two truths and the way that they address certain concepts, certain ideas of the Buddhism, and how they overlap with each other. So it's important to take note of this and begin to be able to understand it from each of their two levels. So in the ultimate bodhicitta, so we say ultimate bodhicitta, it could also be supreme bodhicitta. It could also be absolute bodhicitta, are the three words that are generally used for this ultimate bodhicitta, and it implies there's nothing that surpasses this. So it says it's supreme, absolute, objective, to achieve enlightenment. It is the pervading emptiness endowed with the essence of compassion. It's clear, it's unmoving, and it's free from elaboration. So what does that mean? Free from elaboration. It means that it's beyond our ability to be able to conceptualize what we think it is. To experience this absolute bodhicitta requires exhausting what you know about it, learning, thinking about it intellectually and so on, but then getting to the point of just resting with it and then having a meditative experience with it. And this takes some time to be able to have the confidence to be able to do that. So, but to know that it's there, to know that it is like the source, it is the seminal point from which all this phenomenal nature issues forth. So, one analogy would be the Big Bang. You know, we talk about, that there was this point, and all of a sudden there was this great explosion that all of a sudden then began to fill up all of this space with all the universe, all the things that we recognize as being stars and galaxies and all that kind of stuff is all phenomenal nature. All this came from a single point, a seminal point. So the seminal point could be explained as being this absolute bodhicitta. And now it's burst forth, and sentient beings are trying to recognize how that manifests in their lives and so on, so that they can abide in the bodhicitta. It doesn't become just a wish, it becomes a reality in the sense that we become the embodiment of that. The relative bodhicitta, that phenomenal nature, that phenomenal bodhicitta, is conventional. This is what human beings can agree on. We can say, okay, this is the conventional meaning of bodhicitta, how it relates to us in this life. So, and its benefit is to benefit other beings. So the first, the ultimate, is a personal experience that is beyond the person itself, that is beyond the ego, is beyond the individual identity. It is something where we all become one, so to speak. And the relative is how that dynamic is working with all phenomenal nature, all this unexplained stuff that we're trying to explain through our rationalizations, all our readings, all our studies, and so on, like that. So there's the intellectualization, which is the relative, and then there is the absolute, which is the embodiment. That it's beyond the rationalizations, it's beyond the intellectualization. It becomes the being, the bodhicitta. So the bodhicitta itself is the holy enlightened mind. So we've talked, many times that bodhi means enlightenment, and citta means the heart mind. So we say the holy enlightened heart mind. So this heart mind is that which is that part of that absolute, or it is at one with that absolute nature. The phenomenal is the landing of that. So if that absolute was radiating light, the absolute or the phenomenal is what it lands on. So we see each other because there's light. We become luminous because of the light of the sun, because of the light of the electric light bulbs that we have, and so on, like that. And we're just reflecting that light. If there was no light in the room, we would all just become blackened, like the ambient nature around things. But with the light, with the source of the light, with the source of the absolute bodhicitta, now we can see all these things, and this winds up being wisdom for us. So we say wisdom. The phenomenal nature would be the compassion, saying, oh, you're in darkness. Let me help you to enlighten your darkness. So therefore, I issue forth with this light so you can see what you've been missing in the darkness. You become luminous in the process of doing that. And then you can, if you're capable, to become radiant yourself, to be able to enlighten others and so on. And this is what we strive for. This is the work of the Bodhisattva and the Buddha, to become like the sun, to become radiant like that, through its absolute nature. It says here that, as said by the Buddha in the Clarification of Thought Sutra, so there's one particular sutra called the Clarification of Thought, it says that relative bodhicitta vows, the vows that we take to develop, cultivate, and stabilize bodhicitta, to liberate all sentient beings from suffering from compassion. So this is the relative bodhicitta, that we're doing it for the benefit of others. Does anybody have any question, any comments about absolute bodhicitta and relative bodhicitta, as I just tried to explain?
Would you say this is accurate, that relative bodhicitta says that we're wishing to remove the suffering of all beings. And then absolute bodhicitta recognizes that there are actually no beings that are suffering. They're just there's no separation in beings. There's no duality between suffering and non-suffering. That would be a distinction between those two.
And that's true. And, you use the word, what we're doing is our work is to be able to help beings to enlighten themselves, to be able to recognize the enlightenment themselves. So it says here, we're taking a vow to do that, that we're making a promise to do that for our benefit, for the benefit of other beings, and so on. When we do it, when it becomes the attainment of the absolute, it's already accomplished. It's already done, and so it's perfectly stable. So,
I think about the Diamond Sutra talks about that a lot. Uh, It talks about how the Buddhist tells us it's I think it's Sadhana. I'm not positive that's the name of the person he's talking with. He says that the Bodhisattva has to save all beings, knowing that there are no beings to save. So that's why the Bodhisattva saves all beings. Like you have to maintain this understanding of the relative and the absolute simultaneously, even while he's doing the work of saving all beings. Still have to recognize there's no beings, and by through that recognition, there's also no burnout, right? Because that's sort of like the valve, I guess. Like it could be easily be overwhelming to think, oh, I have to save all beings. But if you realize at the same time that, there are no beings separate from yourself, and it's really then it gives you a way to maybe dig more into that.
well, we're talking about bodhicitta, and then we're also talking about, as you just brought up, emptiness. So at some point they do converge. So right now it'd be more beneficial for us to focus on the bodhicitta and then be able to use that to be able to understand the emptiness and then see the convergence of these two things. But right now we have to look at it in a linear fashion, to be able to get from one thing to the other. If we jump to the convergence of the two things together, it gets overwhelming. And this is the work of the phenomenal nature. This is the purpose of the phenomenal nature. It's as if, I'm going to use a gross example, it was as if, there was a holy being who was a supreme being who said, oh, here is all this abstract stuff, and ordinary beings are not going to be able to understand it. So let me create this display of all this stuff, the positive, the negative, all these dualities, so people can recognize that. So sentient beings can see that duality. Once we establish that, then we can start talking about the emptiness of what that reality is. So I'm just making that point too. Does that make sense to you?
Hmm. Yeah, very much so. I think
It makes, sorry.
Go ahead.
you can't have nirvana without samsara, because samsara enables nirvana to be possible. You have to have the suffering to move beyond the suffering. If there's no suffering, there's no moving beyond.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have cold unless you have hot, like temperature, as a concrete example. You don't know the idea of cotton. But Lance, yes, your main question, it does make sense to me what you're saying. If it's developmentally too complex, you have to separate it and then merge it back together. Otherwise, I
Right.
think we shut down. That's what you're saying, yeah?
So I first gave and I see Aaliyah's with us, so welcome, Aaliyah. So in the Clarification of Thought Sutra, I gave the definition of relative bodhicitta vows to liberate sentient beings from the suffering by compassion through compassion. That compassion is realizing beings are suffering, and they have this compassion, but the compassion always has a method to it, a skillful means about how to allow those beings to be able to recognize the wisdom of what it is that they're doing, to recognize the wisdom of the display itself. So going back now to the Clarification of Thought Sutra, it says the mind of ultimate enlightenment is beyond the world. So first off, it's saying the mind of ultimate bodhicitta, enlightenment, is beyond the world. So it's beyond our ability to be able to articulate it, to be able to intellectualize it, and so on. It's beyond the world. It's free from elaborations. There's nothing that we can say that is going to bring it to you by handing it to you or so on. You have to discover it yourself. It says free from all elaboration. The supremely pure subject of the ultimate, stainless, unmoving, and very clear, like the continuity of a lamp, sheltered from the wind. So the point here is that this realization has to be experienced. And once you experience it, there is a protection that does not change. Once you experience it, if you recognize it as what it is, then you say, oh, I recognize the essence. I recognize that seminal point. I may not be able to explain it. I may not have words for it because it's non-conceptual, but I have experienced that sense of oneness. For lack of better words, I'm using words to explain that which cannot be explained. But we have to approach it from that intellectual point of view, rest the intellect by exhausting all the possibilities. This is the practice. This is the contemplation. And then when we're able to exhaust all that effort that we're going through our physical body of sustaining all this, and through our intellect going through all the permutations of what we think this is, getting to the point where there's no thought about it anymore, then the meditation begins. And the meditation is that transcendence from that ordinary state of mind into this mind of enlightenment, to this mind of clarity, this mind of liberation from any conceptual thoughts. It's non-conceptual. So it sounds abstract, as I said. It sounds abstract until you have the experience. Once you have the experience, then you say, oh, that's what it is. And I am part of that. It is part of me. We are all part of that. It's all part of us, and so on. The duality collapses into just what is. And from that, then we begin to understand the difference between the absolute and the relative, because we have merged, or we've gone through, we've intersected now from that relative into the absolute. We've gone to that point of that seminal point itself. It may take many times to be able to hold it. There's times when you have it, as fast as it comes, it's as fast as it can go. But, each time there is a certain recognition, a level of recognition. So what I'm trying to do is to encourage the practice, encourage the contemplation, encourage the meditation to be able to have that. And it doesn't need a whole lot of instruction, but we give the instruction because people have walls that prevent them from just surrendering to that. So we're trying to point out what the construction of the walls are so that you can say, oh, I'm just building another wall. Oh, I'm just building another obstruction of the freedom. we're trying to contain the freedom to understand the freedom. And that's antithetical of what freedom is. So we have to break it down, and we're pointing out all the different variations of what that can be. So I'm sorry if it's redundant, but that's the effort. That's what we're trying to do. So now the two truths. So we just talked about the two bodhicittas, the two characteristics of bodhicitta, ultimate bodhicitta and relative bodhicitta. Now the two truths that, everybody's looking for the truth. They want the singularity, and so people are chasing that singularity. They have in their mind that there has to be this one thing, that is conceivable by all beings and recognized as this singularity, as this one thing, forgetting that there can be two truths. So here it's trying to describe those two truths. So the two truths, the first is the wish to remove suffering from all beings without exception by bringing all beings to full enlightenment. So the truth is that we're trying to do that. We're trying to bring that out. We're trying to help all beings. This is part of our nature. This is part of what it is to be a sentient human being, is to be helping, to help our children, to help our relatives, to help our friends, to help all beings to do that. We want to bring this good news to everyone. So that truth is the truth, and that's the relative of this is, I'm trying to do this for their benefit. This is a truth, this is a motivation, this is a cause. The second one is the absolute true nature itself. The absolute true nature itself, that there is this truth that again goes back to the idea that it's unconceivable, that is non-conceptual, it's unelaborated, it's non-objectifiable, and so on like that. And it is like water being poured into water, is the quote that Gyaltshen Rinpoche uses all the time. And we find it in some of the sutras. We found it in the Lalita Vistara Sutra. It's like water being poured into water, that when we experience it, it's exactly like that. Not literally, but it is that all of a sudden, all the water just becomes the same. All the water becomes non-composite. So the two truths and the absolute and the relative bodhicitta layer on top of each other. So it says here that the ultimate bodhicitta is obtained through the realization of dharmata, which is suchness, the true nature of phenomena, while relative bodhicitta is obtained through ritual ceremony. So what does this mean? So I'll take the latter first. The relative bodhicitta, this phenomenal nature, is obtained through ritual experience. So these different practices that we do, these different prayers that we recite, these different mantras that we recite, which are the articulation of these deities, which are the personification of energy. So all this ritual stuff is helping us to intellectualize this space, to intellectualize this absolute nature, but as it manifests as the display for our intellect to be able to grasp what it means. In the situation of the ultimate bodhicitta is obtained through the realization of dharmata, the suchness, the true nature of phenomena. So what this is, what the dharmata is in another way of saying the philosophy of what it is to be in this all-pervasive space. The philosophy of being in this space, but at the same time having the intellect to be able to try and capture what all this is and to be able to radiate this to other beings, to be able to share this with other beings. So this Dharmata is that field of the philosophy of what this is, of what this reality is. So it says here the reality, it says the realization of the Dharmata, the suchness. When we realize, oh, this is what it is. This is the suchness of what it is, the suchness of the mind. We begin to realize that the suchness of the mind is the dualistic nature. It is an expression. It is part of that duality, of that phenomenal nature, and we're experiencing all this through that suchness. However, it is it is the display of the absolute. It is the display of the ultimate bodhicitta. The bodhicitta is the wholly enlightened mind that is trying to recognize all this. So these thoughts, seem very abstract and diffuse, but by creating the environment for you to have your personal experience with it is the goal, and that's what's necessary. So we're trying to give you the walls, what the walls are made of, then we want to take down the walls, experience the space, and then we realize that we need to reconstruct the walls to a degree to be able to identify this for the benefit of others, and at the same time as a protection. The walls have a protective quality to them because they, in the midst of all the confusion, the delusion, and the other the greed and the avarice and the hatred and so on of being a samsaric being, that we're pulled away from this subtlety so easily, so much. We need to have some guardrails. So the philosophy is there to be able to help us when we need that. When we're in the true nature, we don't need anything. We are completely space. So to be able to experience that space, but then when we come into the situation of having to be with other beings in the ordinary world and so on, we need to know the boundaries. We need to know the recognition of the boundaries. If we can maintain our space, if we can maintain that absolute nature while being in the midst of the phenomenal nature, then that is enlightenment. That is the Buddha. That is what we talk about as being our true nature, being true nature. If we can maintain that. If you can't maintain that, then you know that you're an ordinary person working in the midst of all this stuff. And there's levels to all of that. And being an ordinary being is not by itself not a terrible thing. By degree, we're somewhere on that spectrum. So we're working towards the perfection realization of the space itself, of the absolute, that needs no further introduction, no further articulation. Any comments or questions?
I think I've heard it another way described as ultimate bodhicitta is the realization of emptiness, and relative bodhicitta is the exercise of the paramitas.
Yes. So the
Huh.
paramitas are the guardrails, the guardrails, the perfections that the bodhisattva employs to be able to get to that realization of the two truths. You know, and then so now the idea of emptiness or the concept of emptiness, which is a concept. We're conceptualizing this non sense of being, that it's all empty, that it's all composite, it's all made up. There's not an absolute nature of all of this. So here it says the emptiness is the lack of inherent reality of a phenomena or a person. So with the emptiness, we realize that this was just a movie. This was just an image. This was just a characterization of that display. And to be able to see that emptiness is a fabrication itself. It's a word that we use to be able to understand that pure nature, unfabricated. Now, does it point to another dimension? And as we get further along in more Dharma experience and scripture and so on, it opens up the door to that there are other levels that as human beings we cannot perceive. Or maybe there's a perception of, but at the same time, it is not something that we can recognize, even if we perceive it. We can experience it. And once we experience it, can we be satisfied in just the experience, or do we need to have further understanding of it? And chasing are we chasing that reality, that notion of a reality? Are we chasing that other dimension? Your animals, or maybe look at it like ants. These ant colonies and so on that are running around very organized, doing all these things. They're great engineers and all this kind of stuff. They don't even recognize human beings. They don't recognize the consciousness level of what human beings embody. It's beyond their ability. They will just walk right over. They will destroy. They will come in and do whatever they want to do, not even realizing what it is that they're doing and what is there. It's like us seeing a shadow and not realizing that there was a light that was shining on, that got blocked by some body, and then creating a shadow and so on. That shadow could be indicative of a whole other universe, of a whole other way of a dimension of looking at all this. This space between us, if we were all in the same room together, the space between us could be filled with other dimensional objects that we simply just don't recognize. We don't hear them. We don't see them. And could there be points where there is a convergence between our dimension, our three dimensions, and say the fourth dimension or fifth dimension or sixth dimension of this, what would appear to be some kind of a supernatural or whatever reality? Can there be convergence of that? And how do we interpret that? And indeed, does this spark the imagination to be able to say, well, is this what unidentified flying objects and so on like that are? Maybe it all becomes part of the multiplicity of all the possibilities that are there that we can theorize and chase. So the emptiness is being able to say, look, all that stuff is possible, all this stuff is here, I need to recognize, I need to accept that all this stuff is empty of its own true nature. It's all what my mind has manifested for me to think that it's real when it's all imaginary. It's all a fabric. It's all a fabrication. And to be able to rest in that. And there's a liberation in that if you can do that. The liberation doesn't come by figuring out the puzzle or in terms of here's the whole picture of the puzzle and now I know everything. The omniscience is recognizing human beings have a limited ability to be able to recognize things, but it doesn't mean that they can't have an experience of those things that is beyond our ability to be able to articulate it.
There's an example that I read about where they use a glass of water, and they had the glass of water there, and they said, this is, human being looks at that and they think that glass of water and they think how refreshing would it be for me to drink that water. But for a being from the hell realm, that water looks like boiling, lava or some type of pus or something else that's horrific. They would never want to drink that. That would be they think that's disgusting or that's painful or they're fearful of that. Where a being from the God realm looks at that same glass of water and sees it as nectar, as this kind of ambrosia or something. And the idea is that the beings see, taking just for the sake of the story, we'll just pretend that these different beings they're actual beings, right? They would say that those beings can't decide to see that water as anything other than what they see because of their karma. So the karma that has placed this person in the hell being has made that such that they have to experience that water as something that, would be painful or revolting or something they couldn't drink. A human being has the karma to see that as water that they can drink. And a god has the karma to see that as something ambrosia or something more tasty, something more like medicine, maybe something stronger than more beneficial than water. But the being can't just decide to see it differently. The karma, you can work on your karma, right? You can do things that are going to affect your karma, but you can't just make a mental decision. I'm going to see that water as nectar, and then I'm going to drink it. It's going to be nectar. You have to do the activities that are going to affect your karma. You have to go through the process to actually make that change happen.
And you just hit on a key point of being able to recognize the nature of things. That's an important point. The knowledge of the nature of the skandhas, of the dhatus, of the ayatanas. So that's the field of all this stuff that we recognize with our six senses. The six senses being the five of the eyes and the nose and the mouth and the tongue, I should say, and the ears and the skin, the touch. So recognizing that and recognizing the fields, the objects in which that operates, those senses operate, and then the brain that is taking that information in and processing it, to be able to recognize that is the nature of the phenomenal nature. That is what the phenomenal nature of being a human being is, and that the skandhas are the form, the perceptions, the sensations, the naming and the consciousness level of all that and so on. That this is how we build up, our field of knowledge, our field of understanding, and so on. So that's an important element. No, it's recognizing how you work as a human being, how you work as an animal, how you work as a three-dimensional being in this phenomenal nature that goes beyond three dimensions. So the next thing to think about is that there is a aspiration to do this, and that there's a lot of beings, a lot of humans, who are in that aspirational lineage. They are trying to acquire the knowledge. They are trying to accomplish the scripture. They're trying to intellectualize what all this is. This is the aspiration lineage, otherwise known as the wisdom lineage. You're trying to understand this from an intellectual point of view. There's also the action lineage, or the method lineage. And this is the group of people who are saying, okay, whatever I've acquired from the aspiration lineage, now I realize for it to be effective, for me to do something with it, for it to be transformative, I have to be able to utilize this. I have to actualize this wisdom. I have to actualize these aspirations and so on. So people on the path, they all probably start as aspirational. I want to do this. I want to get to enlightenment and so on. And I'm going to intellectualize myself into doing that. The action lineage people say, well, I'm going to take whatever knowledge I have now, and I'm going to make the choice to start living as an enlightened being, and going through the action of doing that and taking on the karma for doing that to expand our field of operation, our field of doing, and so on. So this is the method lineage. The third lineage is called the realization lineage, or the lineage of the yogas. And this is transformative through the interaction of the guru, through the teacher, through the Buddha, who is within you. Until we realize it's within us, we have to rely on the guru who is exterior to us. That guru is pointing you in the direction of what's within yourself. But until you recognize that, you're counting on, you're using the pointing out instructions, etc., the scriptures that the lineage is bringing to you, that the lineage of the yogas and so on. So it's their realization that is inspiring you to be able to be on this path, to be able to discover it yourself. When you engage then, when you recognize that that is within yourself, that you are the guru, that wisdom and that activity is all within you, then you become the guru. And that wisdom comes up from inside. You become the Buddha. You become the true nature. And this is what we're trying to get to. And this is one of the things that I think that in our culture that we are trying to square with the old culture, the old land, Tibet, India, and so on like that. They have it that you come up in this very regimented hierarchy of aspiration, action, and realization through the guru to be able to get to enlightenment. On this side now, we say, well, you know what? I was born with a lot of this. I understand this. I can't recall, what I was doing in 1850, but I'm part of a vibration that has never stopped from 1850 BC or AD or wherever it's going. I'm part of that. And I have accomplishment already within myself. And based on that, I'm saying I don't need to differentiate all that level of stuff that they do in the old world, which is very useful, and we need to do it to a degree, but we're not bound by it. Part of what this all is to be liberated in this life, to not have to be bound to any of these things. to liberate ourselves and be free of the constraints of the convention, to break out. And this is, I think, the gift that we bring to this dharmata, that we bring to this philosophy. Now, everyone doesn't do this. Just because we're born in America or in the Western Hemisphere or something like that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody has that. Most beings do not, you know. And this Western idea can also be, in India, or it can be in Tibet, or it can be in Africa or whatever, that these beings now can be those beings born anywhere in this world. It doesn't have to be localized to just America or something like that. It's more a sense of the white hole in time. It's how things are moving along in the evolution of consciousness, of awareness, and so on. So as I said, it becomes an impact, it becomes a gift of the philosophy, of the Dharmata. We're opening up another point of view of that philosophy. There are points of the philosophy, as it has been in the past, where there were breakthroughs. That before that, whether it was in science or it's in Buddhist philosophy, where they thought the world was flat. But then there was this breakthrough. They realized it was a globe, it was a sphere, and then a whole new dynamic of science came with it. The same thing is happening with the mind, the Mind Insight Institute, and so on. That there's new breakthroughs that are on the horizon. We may not even know about it. Unless you're part of that institute, you're part of those meetings and hear the teachings and reflect on how that impacts your life and everything, to be able to recognize these things and see these things. So my point is that we're on a bleeding edge of this evolution. Look, for what, 2,000, 2,600 years, the center of this Dharma has been India, or Tibet, has been the Himalaya region, and so on. Now that's shifting. It's coming to the West. And when that comes to the West, how is that going to manifest? How is that going to work? Are we going to see a bringing together of not only the Buddhist Dharma philosophy, but along with it, something that will coalesce along with the Christian, along with the Islamic, along with the other traditions, the Hebrew tradition, and so on, the Indian, Hindu tradition, as well as the shamanic traditions of the North American Indians, for instance. Would it all blend together? Is that, and do we call that a singularity? In philosophy, maybe we do, but it's still indicative of the absolute nature, but not of the relative nature. The relative nature is still a display, is still relative to something else. But this is talking about something that becomes an evolution of the realization of that absolute nature. What do you think of that?
Lance, I don't know if I don't want to cut Elia off, but everything you said I agree with. I think we're in that direction, and as you said, I think the natural evolution of what's happening is the Dharma is coming to the West. And so we're kind of, I would say, pioneers, like within this consciousness and these vessels we're in. And we're going through that right now, right? As what we call Lance, Kunga, Aliyah, Zara. We're experiencing that right now because we live in the West, right? And we're trying to sort this all out. And so I see that looking at it from a long view perspective. And also I think each of us here are like, you have a Jewish background, I have an Islamic background. We all have these different backgrounds. So I think we can see even within our families, like some of these things happening within our own generation. I can see it happening with my nieces and nephews who are age 11, like within their lifetime. Some of what you're describing. So I agree with everything you're saying.
Thank you.
Aaliyah?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think what resonated with me was regarding like seeing your true nature and figuring out like who you are and trying to get to like your higher self and being able to kind of like embody that in order to get to like nirvana. And I've had like a couple instances this week where you can kind of see like my director is not very embodied in like, helping other people or who she is, and actually called me yesterday regarding an issue that occurred. And I was like, oh, okay. She really just lacked the insight to understand like what had happened and what was going on. So it's very interesting to kind of, I don't know, walk her through what I thought was the situation because she just really didn't have the insight or I don't know, reflectiveness or awareness. So I really had to scale back, is she actually like ready to hear what happened or what was going on? Because I was agreeing with someone, she felt like I should have been on her side. And it was just a very weird dynamic. But seeing that she felt that I was that person to be a sounding board to made me kind of realize like, okay, maybe my sattvic calm nature maybe helped her in some ways, and that, to kind of continue that and, back to being, what your true nature is, like whatever it is, whether it's like rajasic or tamasic or sattvic. So it's a good like lesson for me.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, being able to see this in your reality, be able to see how this manifests in your world and so on. And that's, part of the practice, practicing to be able to do that and to be constantly, evaluating and feeding that experience over and over again, because you continue to have these experiences and feeding it with new knowledge, with new information, and that's why Sangha is so important, because by entering into a dialogue, into a conversation with others, sparks, the intellect to be able to move into territory that it hasn't been before, limits that it had been before. Some of that, there's a risk of being delusional, no doubt. But at the same time, that delusion becomes fodder for knowledge, fodder for purification, for understanding. There's a practice book. There's it's a highest yoga tantra. It's called the Nam Jang, and the translation of Nam Jang is the refinement of perception. The refinement of perception. So what we perceive, and the perception is part of the skandhas, the 5 skandhas, which are the heaps of being a human being. So by refining our experience with the other forms of what's going on in this phenomenal nature and using new or expanded awareness to be able to comprehend that and to actualize that is a vital part. And the practice never ends. It is once we achieve what we think is a very, very high level, 10th level Bhumi or Bodhisattva or even Buddha, we find that the practice still is necessary. We're always involved in the evolution. Kunga, what do you think?
I was thinking about a family I was working with today, and the daughter is kind of the caregiver for her two parents. The father is independent. The mother is has dementia, and she has a brain tumor, and she's in a memory unit. And the daughter is really upset that the father's perception of her mom and how her mom's doing is so different than her own. And it really bothers her a lot. She really has a hard time just understanding that it's okay for him to have a different perception. He doesn't have to have her perception. Her perception is her perception, and he's going to have a different one. It's his wife. He's older. He has cognitive problems of his own that limit his ability to understand the situation she does. And he just has a different experience of it. So it's just a struggle. And it's really, that's a big struggle for many people lots of the time, is that they have a hard time understanding that their perception is it's just their perception. They're it's limited by when they have the perception, their own experience, where they're viewing it from, what they're holding on to, what they're attached to. And it's not their perception is not the only perception. It's not going to be the true perception, because everything that happens is changing all the time. There's many perspectives on any single thing all the time. So there's never just one. The only true perception is there's many perceptions. There's many perspectives. That's the only true perspective. So that's what it made me think about that idea. And what you were talking about with the idea of you're always developing the practice. You're always practicing. It's that because that is, it's a that's the experience is the development of the practice. There's nothing else. There's no end point, because time is moving on, moments moving on, moment to moment. We're always in this present moment, but it's always a little bit different than the previous moment, and we have to constantly refine our perception of things. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'm involved in a book study of this Namjang that I was just referring to, the purification of perception. And in this chapter that we were just going over, it introduced the idea of discovery. And we need to be able to allow ourselves that discovery of what we call the mind, what we call perception, what we call being a human being, all these things that we've sussed out and so on. But then as we engage in this phenomenal experience to do this and everything, we discover things that are maybe more aspects of that, but also we're discovering that they all lead to, or they all issue forth from, this absolute nature. And so this discovery is very important. And so we should allow ourselves to do that. And to do that, of course, we have to set up the right circumstances. So the circumstances are to be able to have those periods of study, to have those periods of contemplation, to have those periods of meditation, when we go beyond our self, when we go beyond being Lance or being Aliyah or being Kunga or being Zara, sitting on the cushion, and doing this. But then also taking the post-meditation, taking that experience with us, taking that meditation with us as we get up off the cushion and we go out into the regular world, and seeing, like Aliyah was just talking about, what you were just talking about, Kunga, is applying it to real life situation and seeing how these are echoes of that discovery or whatever. And so what comes out of this, we can say that there can be creation. We're not bound by the creation, But at the same time, the creation becomes, a mode of expression and understanding, and how we are continuing on that wavelength, on that continuum of vibration and so on, to be able to see this more and more. And to see, that there is a futility even, to this kind of discussion. But what this futility leads to is a liberation of being at peace, of being the space. And that makes all this worthwhile, to be able to experience that. Somebody was saying, I think it was Zara was saying, to appreciate hot, you have to know cold, and vice versa. To appreciate light, you have to have darkness. To appreciate light or to appreciate darkness, you have to have light. If I mix it up, forgive me. That's how short my mind can be sometimes. So anyway, so this is what we're looking at. So this is the Dharmata. This is the philosophy of the phenomenal nature, and with the inspiration, if nothing else, of that absolute. So this, what I've been talking about then, is the highest yoga tantra, which means that all this other stuff that we are talking about is formative to get to that point. Unless we happen to be those who are born with experience with this in prior lives, we're higher, if you want to use that expression, we're higher on the vibrancy of that wavelength, and maybe it's the frequency of the wavelength. How often does that wave go? Is it very drawn out, like a 60 cycle, or is it 10,000, where it's very much like this, and much more, and then we're coming to recognize that, we're coming to realize that. So, using 21st century science, the Science Mind Institute, that was the name of that, the Science Mind Institute, where the two are coming together ever faster. So bodhicitta are the four vast immeasurable qualities of the essence of what this is, of what the true nature is, of what the liberation is, the loving kindness, the compassion, the joy, and the equanimity within those who are the embodiment of this bodhicitta. They have those four qualities. We have those potentials of those four qualities, and they come out at periods of time. What we're trying to do is to cultivate that bodhicitta so that everything that we do is saturated with bodhicitta. So that's why this is one of the core teachings. And I was having a conversation with somebody earlier today and talking about there are some things that you should know. And if you're going to make a study of the Dharma, this is one of the things that you should know is bodhicitta. And knowing those four immeasurable qualities, and knowing, these elements of the wisdom lineage and the method lineage, the realization lineage, and so on, and see, how you are actualizing that in your own life and so on, to recognize that, to be able to articulate that. Part of the process is to be a teacher. The first person we teach is ourselves. Without that, you're going to be a hopeless teacher for other beings, and you're not going to be, you'll remain as a deluded, ignorant, selfish human being. So not that we should do these things out of fear, but we should do these things out of joy. That's that, taking the fear and transforming it into joy. That is a hallmark of the Shravaka and the Pratyeka Buddha. When we talked about the levels, the 5 Buddha family levels, and if you remember, we talked about fear and being an element of the Arhats and the Pratyeka Buddhas, that their motivation is fear. If they don't, they're going to miss something. So the fear has to give way to the joy, that I want to do this because it's going to bring liberation, it's going to bring freedom, it's going to bring happiness to other beings, which then is going to allow me to be free. All right. Any other comments, questions?
I have just it's not necessarily bodhicitta, but for the 4 thoughts that turn the mind, so impermanence, right? In understanding impermanence, then that's really emptiness, understanding emptiness, correct?
One of the ways you can understand emptiness through impermanence.
Yeah, they kind of layer on top of each other. The impermanence is a quality of the emptiness.
Let me think about that. The impermanence is a quality of emptiness. So when we talk about understanding emptiness, you really have to have a handle on impermanence from a developmental concept, correct? You really have to have really contemplated impermanence to then understand emptiness. Is that correct?
Yes, and that's why we put the study of the 4 thoughts, before this talk about bodhicitta and so on. Mm-hmm. There's a sequence to this. First are the prayers, set our motivation. Then comes the 4 thoughts to turn the mind to the Dharma, why we're studying the Dharma altogether. Then when we get a firmness in that, then we move on to the stages of the meditation.
I was more clarifying for, honestly, selfishly, which I hope it does benefit other people, though, because I really, like you were just saying, I just had this natural aha moment, where you start connecting dots, where like the concepts, and I was like, Zara, if you understand impermanence, then you get emptiness, because there's no real moment that lasts. Everything is truly empty. Like when you contemplate it, like the leaf falls, it rains, and then it stops raining. You're hungry, then you're not. Like I'm talking about microscopic impermanence, and then you start seeing the macroscopic of it. That's the bigger picture of your spirituality, and that's a moment I've had in the last couple weeks, Lance, in Kunga, like just from the 5-fold like Mahamudra, and that's a natural unfolding for me. Like you were saying, like don't force these moments where the curiosity, because then it wouldn't stick. Now it sticks. Now it sticks for me. Right. So. Thank you. I was curious to make sure I understood first and foremost from the 2, like both of you were more advanced than me. I wanted to make sure I was following it correctly, that I had to have a handle on impermanence before I could really understand all this discussion on emptiness. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
As well as the other 4 thoughts.
Oh, all of it. And I think more specifically I was wondering if they were synonyms, like you had to be able to like write print before you can do cursive, right? So let's say cursive is emptiness and print is impermanence. Like it just like that's my analogy as a teacher, but essentially I can't do cursive until I can start printing letters or drawing lines. And so I just made that realization today. I know that seems probably very naive and like an infant.
No, it's good. I mean, you're on the path, and you're taking things apart, putting them back together again. You're seeing the things that are unnecessary, but you're also seeing the things that are vital.
Yes, that's it right there. Yeah. I also had another question. I see Kunga. I wonder if Kunga had a thought, but Kunga, pin that thought if you have a thought. Nirvana. Nirvana is still samsara, correct?
It's the other side of samsara. It's dualistic.
Yeah. Okay. So that's not real freedom yet.
No.
Okay.
No. It's temporary. It's temporary freedom. It's temporary freedom in the ocean of suffering.
Yeah. So when people are like joking in the West, I want to reach nirvana, they're still in the illusion world. They're like
it's a temporary thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure I'm using the right words. So enlightenment is the word, that's the vocabulary, correct, Lance? That is really away
Well,
from.
yeah, but to tell you the truth, I prefer liberation. I
Okay,
think
liberation.
liberation to me is more succinct to the process of what we call enlightenment.
Yes. So that's a verb, liberation, or no? Is that a verb?
Well, you can reach liberation. There it's a
Okay.
noun.
Okay.
Or you can liberate, which is the process of attaining liberation. But it's freedom. The essence of it all is freedom.
Okay. Okay, that's helpful. Because
And that's what we're all striving to be is free. We all want to be free.
yeah. Well, Lance, not everybody does. Some people want to stay in the cycle at the God
But
realm.
they think they're being free. And
Correct.
while they're doing that, they're deluding themselves and
Yes.
thinking that they're free and that the enjoyment that they are experiencing is their freedom. But they don't realize how bound up they are to that. What their pride quality is, what their delusion quality is, what their greedy quality is, and so on like that. They don't recognize that.
Okay. Thank you. Good. I feel like you have some wisdom phrases.
Leah, did you have something you wanted to say?
No, I think it's interesting, the different realms and just, the people's paths or non-paths to like enlightenment or not. And I think it's interesting to be able to have the luxury of just at least having the wisdom and the knowledge that that's the path and where we're trying to get to, and people's process of trying to get there, and of attainment. So I definitely think we're lucky to be able to kind of have that like knowledge and understanding and pathway to get there, and just like a bigger picture realization and understanding of like our human existence. And I think Zara and I have talked about this too, this kind of being more of like a matrix in some ways. And I just recently started yoga teacher training, and um my second set, it's like the 300 hour, and it's really interesting just to see like the lessons. I think I'm sitting back a lot more and understanding what's kind of like going on and learning these lessons and kind of understanding the connections and why, what the lessons are, and a lot of the people I'm meeting, the things I'm having to do, as it helps elevate me to the next level or where I need to go or where I need to be. Even in work too, I think it's like a veil is being kind of lifted in some ways of maybe my purpose and how to get there, and what needs to be done. So it's not easy and it's not pretty, but it's it's been challenging, it's been tough, but I feel like things are finally kind of, it's interesting, like how you were talking about the spiral. It's feeling like the spiral, so I feel like I'm in the middle of it right now.
Yeah. You're
Hmm.
seeing the joy, you're recognizing joy, you're motivated by joy, and
Yeah,
also in the equanimity of it, seeing that there is a sameness and all that, recognizing that.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, all the lessons are coming together. It's making a lot of sense. So I feel like having this information and background and foundation has given me a different view of life and humanity and things like that too. Uh,
Mhm.
just
Sure.
the journey of
And
this.
as we repeat these things, the circle goes round.
Yeah.
If we continue on this program that we're involved in now, this time next year, we will have gone over these things yet again.
Hmm.
And there are times that maybe we miss something or something, and we start filling in the empty spaces that we didn't get. And the connection comes, and then the third year,
Hmm.
becomes even more, and then the fifth year and so on. And having done this for many, many years, you see that pattern, you see how that works, and the skillful means that's involved there, the compassion that is involved there, the compassion for yourself and the compassion of the teacher, the compassion of your brothers and sisters. This is the work of that compassion.
Hmm. Yeah.
All right. Unless anybody has anything you'd like to say, we'll do our dedication. So, Kunga, would you recite that, please?
Sure, I'm going to do the Dakarma prayer.
Sure.
By the virtues collected in the three times, by myself and all beings, of samsara and nirvana, and by the innate root of virtue, May I and all sentient beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious enlightenment. May the teachings of the great Drikungpa Ratnashri, who is omniscient Lord of the Dharma, master of interdependence, continue to increase study, practice, contemplation, meditation, and end of samsara. Sarva Mangalamai.
Om.
Om Hum.
Om.
Om Hum.
Om.
Om Hum. May
May
my
my body,
body,
speech, and
and
mind
mind become
become
inseparable
inseparable with
from the
the body,
body,
speech,
and mind of all the enlightened ones,
for
for the
the
benefit of
benefit
all
of
sentient beings.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope to see you all
Good
next
night, you
week.
guys.
Good night.
Okay.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.